So this is just to talk about essentially making sure that we accurately account for and recognize in the plan the fact that Muskoka is, in some ways, the Muskoka Algonquin Health System is a provincial resource, right? So it's a local hospital for the people who live in Muskoka, but it's also a resource for all the people who visit Muskoka as tourists or seasonal residents. This is showing essentially the distribution of different types of services across the year, right? So we see the number of emergency department visits in total. This combines the two sites, so nearly 44,000 visits. We show where people come from throughout the year. So that first column says percent of people from Muskoka or Parry Sound. So in April, 92% of the people who came to your ED lived in Muskoka or Parry Sound, right? You don't have a lot of outside visitors in that time. But by the time you get to August, that number falls to 62%. The number of visits goes up, by the way, from 3,300 in April to 4,900 in August. And 38% of the visits are for people from live elsewhere, right? It could be elsewhere in Ontario or elsewhere, in the country or elsewhere in the world. You get some of all of those people. So it just shows the fact that basically you have a very busy ED department in the summer and the high, tourist months. But, and overall you have, over the course of the year, 82% of your visits are for people who live locally and 18% are from elsewhere. But the people who visit your ED as tourists are less likely to be admitted. So that's what the next column, and the next part of the table shows, is that on the inpatient side, although ED visits from people who live outside of Muskoka or Parry Sound were 18% of your ED visits, they're only 9% of your admissions. Okay, so 9% of your people admitted to your hospital come from elsewhere. And I think we go on even into the next exhibit if you've still got maintained that order, is that the people who get admitted actually spend shorter time in hospital than people who are, so people who live elsewhere and get admitted, that 9%, they have shorter lengths of stay than people who live locally and get admitted, presumably because, if you, on average, the seasonal population and the tourists are going to be on average healthier, and maybe they've had, broken a bone or something, but they don't stay in hospital very long, as opposed to people with complications of heart failure or COPD or asthma or diabetes or something like that might drive another type of admission. So 5% essentially, or sorry, 5 beds or 5% of your days in acute care are for people who live outside of Muskoka or Parry Sound. Right. So as it comes along, the transient population, we'll call them, is a relatively high proportion of your ED visits, a small proportion of your inpatient admissions, and an even smaller proportion of your inpatient days or bed use. But all of this, the resources by all of these people that are used at Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare are included in our plan and projected to grow as well, right? So if it's 5 beds today used by people who live elsewhere, it's 10. We're planning 10 beds in the future to keep pace with those.
So we're planning for growth. It's good to know. It's interesting to know because we have heard a lot from folks that, have we accounted for the seasonal influx? And we have.
Right.
And this is showing that not only we do see an influx in patients, but that their admissions are lower. And not all patients get admitted to the hospital. So that's good information.